Tommy, I suspect a lot of people think of the router as a specialty tool, maybe something used by a high-end woodworker, but you actually use it all of the time for a whole bunch of projects.
I do. I use it all the time because it's a very versatile tool. You can do a lot of different things with it. It's just a matter of what bit you choose. I mean, like if you're doing a porch and you want to take a square baluster and you want to make it round, or if you want to put a little beaded detail on an edge.
Nice way to dress up an otherwise square piece of wood.
Yeah, and again, now this is an edge right here that you could use on a panel. If you notice the corner right here, but if I flip it over, it makes a nice detail for under a shelf.
And what's that profile called again?
This is called a Roman ogee.
Yes, right.
Now, if I take this strip of wood and I rip that thin strip off, I now have a little piece of molding that I could use for a shoe molding or on top of a baseboard or anything.
Yeah.
Now, for joinery, it's great. Like here, I've done a dado and a rabbet and put them together, and now I have a nice strong joint for all kinds of things, putting cabinets together, or even drawers or stairs or whatever.
And a lot stronger than if you were just to butt those two pieces up to each other.
Right, because I have a lot more gluing surface than a straight cut, like on a straight joint like that.
Okay.
Now, you can also use a router as a drill press for drilling holes for pegs to make shelf adjustments. You could use a dowel or you could use a cleat that you get at your home center.
Sure, and then I see some flooring right here, and you're telling me that this little connection, the tongue and the groove, that's something that you would do with a router?
Absolutely.
All right, so those are the projects. Let's talk about the tools. The smallest router, probably the trim router.
Right, this is a great tool. It's a one-handed router, great for tight spots. I like to use it, I can use it inside a cabinet. If I'm making a cabinet, I want to cut a hole for an outlet or do a little detail here and there. But it doesn't have a lot of horsepower, so you can't use big bits in it. If you use a bit that's too big, you'll burn it. You'll burn the wood.
So for the bigger bits, we go to a bigger machine.
Right. Now, any bit that I use on this trim router, I can use on any other router. Now, this is a 2 1/4 horsepower fixed base. When I say fixed base, it does have some adjustability to it, and quickly on the major heights, and then fine-tune it here.
Right.
But once it's adjusted, then it's a two-handed router to make your cuts. It's also variable speed. You'd want to slow it down on a bigger bit.
Right, okay. And so this is a typical router, maybe the first router someone buys, this size at least.
Right. Now this router actually comes with two bases. This is actually a base that I can drop this motor right in like that, lock it in. Now this gives me the capability to plunge this bit down, make my cut, bring it up out of the way.
And this is the tool that you'd use if you were doing the dowels that you pointed out before, or the shelf pins right here.
Right.
The plunge router is perfect for that.
Right, but don't think of a plunge router as just strictly a drill press. Let's say I wanted to cut an inlay into something. I would take my plunge router over, with it running, drop it down, into position, lock my depth, make my cut, bring it up, get it out of the way.
So this router with that horsepower and the plunge feature is probably the first router most homeowners should go for.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about the bits, because as you said, that's sort of the key to the operation, and there are a lot of choices.
There's hundreds of different choices. Let's choose these right here. These are the same kind of bits, but all three are different sizes. All right, now, not only is the cutter size different, but the shank size is different. Here's one here, same size bits, same size cutter, but the shank size is different.
Right, and that's key because the shank ends up going into what they call the collet. Now this is going to be attached to the router, so you got to make sure that you get the right size bit for whatever collet's on your router.
That's a 1/2 inch collet, and this is a 1/4 inch collet. It's also important to know that most routers have interchangeable collets.
Right. Okay. So different cutting profiles. You've got what you call the straight cutting bit in there.
Right.
And that was what you'd use actually for that dado you showed us.
This I used for a dado. You can use it for a rabbet. You can use it for all kinds of different things. But this is the right size for that dado.
And then when you cut this Roman ogee profile, you used a guy like this.
Right. And this guy right here actually has a bearing on the bottom, and it's used as a guide. So basically, once I set the depth of my cut, the bearing rides along the edge, stopping the bit from going in. So it's a guide, so I can go right around the whole piece, and the bit will cut at the right depth the whole way.
And it rides on that edge, whereas a straight cutter might actually go into the field of this material right here.
Right.
All right, and then we've got other bearing bits for specialty projects. You got this is what, a templating?
This is a templating bit, or flush cutting bit. And this is a bearing on the bottom, again, like the other one. And then if you notice that this bearing is the exact same diameter as the outside of the cutting edge of the blade. Now that allows you to flush cut or trim off a veneer or something like that. Now you can get a bearing on the bottom or you can get a bearing on the top. You can get different sizes of cuts and different diameters of cuts.
But the key here is this allows you to trim things off or actually template follow an exact pattern.
Right, flush cutting a piece of trim, flush cutting molding, flush cutting veneers.
All right, well, let's pick a couple bits and cut some stuff.
Okay. To install a bit, I put it into my collet, tighten it down with a wrench, then I set my height and I'm ready to cut. I want to overhang my board from my workbench and clamp it down so it won't move. As I'm making my cut, you can see the bearing following the edge of the board. With a router, it's important to use hearing protection and eye protection. I'm pushing the router into the work, cutting counterclockwise.
All right, Tommy, a nice smooth, clean cut that really dresses up this edge.
And one of many that you can make with a router.
I think a lot of homeowners are going to be adding a router to the toolkit.
It's a smart move.